The New Orleans Saints' 4-year, $150 million contract for quarterback Derek Carr may go down as the franchise's worst deal in its history. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, New Orleans Saints new head coach Kellen Moore has an opportunity now to do something that former head coach Sean Payton never did. And we're going to kick everything off with a look at Derek Carr's contract, which, if he never sees the field for the New Orleans Saints again, could end up becoming the worst signing in franchise history. We got all that and much more today on what is going to be a very tough conversation to open up today's show. We appreciate you very much as always, whether it's your first time or your next time, for making us your first listen and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's just the truth that if Derek Carr never sees the field for the New Orleans Saints, which is now possible, thanks to a shoulder injury jeopardizing his 2025 season and his outlook beyond 2025 already felt like a foregone conclusion that he would be gone. If that does indeed end up being the case, Derek Carr's 4-year, $150 million contract, the richest contract the New Orleans Saints have ever in their franchise history doled out to a new acquisition, would go down very likely as the worst contract ever by the New Orleans Saints when it comes to new free agents, right? I think you can make the argument around Michael Thomas and the way that all dissolved very quickly. I think you can make the argument still for Jairus Byrd, who signed a 6-year, $54 million contract with $28 million guaranteed. The safety who signed with the New Orleans Saints and appeared in just over 30 games and finished his 3 seasons halfway through his 6-year contract with just 3 interceptions at safety. But Derek Carr, it feels like, takes the cake. And listen, part of it is because of the shadow that he's under, which is the greatest free agent acquisition in the franchise's history, in fellow quarterback Drew Brees, who is the greatest player in the franchise's history. And so when you are the quarterback that signs the next big deal immediately after, or not immediately after, but the next big deal after the retirement of Drew Brees, the other contracts were deals with, short-term deals with Teddy Bridgewater, short-term deals with Andy Dalton, short-term deals with Jameis Winston, the 3 of which there were no major expectations around. Derek Carr was the first quarterback signing that the New Orleans Saints put out there or got done that had a level of expectation to it of returning to competition and being a good football team, right? A winning football team moving forward. Derek Carr, if he never takes another snap in the black and gold, did not provide that, and the Saints did not get that during his tenure. And his tenure, of course, is tied to Dennis Allen's tenure. Trust me, it wasn't all perfect around Derek Carr either, right? Coaching was an issue. Todd Grantham over on the defensive side had the defensive line and a whole bunch of different fury and everything going on there and turmoil going on there. You talk about the injuries all over the team. Pin it wherever you want. The level of expectation that comes with signing any quarterback, which, by the way, remove Derek Carr's name from the equation. Signing a quarterback to a 4-year, $150 million deal in 2023 with the expectation that that quarterback is going to bring you to a competitive level where you can compete for and potentially win your division, that's the expectation that the Saints had when they signed Derek Carr, is not an illogical amount of money to spend. The issue, or not the issue, but the benefit that we have now is not hindsight, but context and results. And with those that context, with those results, Derek Carr's contract tenure with the New Orleans Saints, if it ends now, goes down as the most disappointing contract the New Orleans Saints have given out. And again, I don't think it was a bad investment. At the time, it's what it turned into. Here's what it turned into. A 4-year deal, 17 games a season. That's a maximum of 68 regular season games that were possible between the New Orleans Saints and quarterback Derek Carr. If the tenure ends today, after the shoulder injury was reported on Friday that jeopardizes his 2025, we already didn't expect that he would be around in 2026 unless 2025 went magically, which doesn't sound like that's going to be the case. If he never sees the field again, he will have appeared for the New Orleans Saints in just 27 games. That's less than half of what they signed him to do. 17 games, 17 starts, and 17 appearances. He did have some second halves missed with a variety of injuries, including head injuries like concussions, as well as shoulder injuries, things like that. That happened in 2023, but still 17 games, 17 appearances. Last year, because of missing weeks 6 through 8 with an oblique injury and his season ending prematurely in week 14 after an ill-advised leaping attempt for a first down on second down during a New York Giants game, landed him in concussion protocol and forced his season to end because of a left hand injury, a non-throwing hand injury. He appeared in 10 games. Over the course of those 27 games, he finished just barely with a winning record with the New Orleans Saints. And again, injuries, all these other things are a part of this, but you paid the quarterback. 14-13 ends up being the record. And then when it comes to the statistics, effectively over the course of 27 games, he put up a solid 1 year. 4,149 passing yards, 26 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Derek Carr and his contract will go out with an underwhelming whisper if this is the end of his tenure. If somehow he magically returns in 2025, balls out, has this great year, everything kind of changes. But the likelihood of that happening at this point just feels, well, very unlikely. Forgive my word forensics there, but feels just very unlikely. And again, I don't think that the Saints did anything wrong in making this decision in 2023. You needed a quarterback. Derek Carr was the quarterback that you identified, that you wanted. You can have the conversation around that, whether or not that was a good decision or whether or not it wasn't. But the market rate for quarterbacks at this time dictated what became the highest paid or highest paying free agency acquisition in the New Orleans Saints history, which is a team, by the way, in free agency that doesn't take big swings like that very often. So you're not going to find the Albert Hainsworths or the Javon Walkers or the Trent Browns in the New Orleans Saints history like you find with teams like the Raiders and the Commanders and others in their history where they took bigger swings. The Saints are not a big-time home run swing type team in free agency. And so when you fumble something like this, or when something like this gets fumbled, it feels much louder. And especially when it's under the shadow of the immediate comparison, which is the other quarterback contract that they gave out years ago back in 2006, being the contract that led to the New Orleans Saints franchise rejuvenation, the golden era of the New Orleans Saints franchise, and a Super Bowl ring, which of course is always the goal for every team, including those 2 years where the New Orleans Saints began with Derek Carr. It stinks, and it's a clumsy, clunky way for this whole tenure to come to an end, but Derek Carr's contract will likely go down, if this is it for him in New Orleans, as the worst free agency signing of the New Orleans Saints history, which does not dictate what they do moving forward, but certainly colors what they've done in the past. Now the New Orleans Saints are looking to turn the page, not only at quarterback, but probably begin their rebuild heading into 2025, which gives Kellen Moore the opportunity to do something that the best head coach in franchise history, Sean Payton, never got done. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Armada Player of the Week is brought to you by our friends over at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, we're picking players that we believe stand out and stand apart from the rest of the NFL draft class. And one of the hottest names for the New Orleans Saints right now has begun to be Louisville quarterback Tyler Shough. So I'm going to choose him as our 2025 Armada Player of the Week today. 6'5", 219 pounds, has some injury history and has some things to improve under pressure, but has been getting a lot of buzz as a quarterback to go earlier than most expect because of his elite processing, ability to read full fields, and good arm with great arm strength and accuracy to boot. It's clear that Tyler Shough is somebody that could potentially look to conquer the road ahead with confidence, and the New Orleans Saints, you can do the same, conquering with confidence over with that Nissan Armada and all of their other outstanding Nissan vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada Rogue or Pathfinder and go and find your next big adventure. Shop today at nissanusa.com. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints now have their chance to turn the page on what feels like the darkest timeline of modern New Orleans Saints history, going from the Dennis Allen era and the Derek Carr era, which will all be tied together. But now they're coming out. They're in the Kellen Moore era. There's an opportunity now to begin their rebuild. And I want to be very clear that beginning a rebuild doesn't, well, you know what? I'll get to that in a moment. Let me stay on topic. What this now does for Kellen Moore is that it gives him a formidable challenge, right? This isn't something that a lot of coaches expect to deal with showing up for their potential or for their first head coaching gig, right? Show up and all of a sudden your quarterback's gone. It's a challenging situation. However, it does provide him with an opportunity to do something that even Sean Payton, who brought a Super Bowl to New Orleans, the winningest franchise, winningest time or era of the franchise, the golden era of the franchise as well, completely revitalized the city of New Orleans when it came to the Saints and all these other things and had other major impacts. Even he couldn't do, which is take a quarterback from the draft to starter. Now, to Sean Payton's credit, he ain't have to, right? He had Drew Brees, who showed up with him in 2006, and those two absolutely ran the gamut as the best quarterback and head coach duo that this franchise has ever seen. And so there weren't many investments in the draft. Sean Canfield in 2010. You think about Garrett Grayson years later, years after that. Once you get into the 2020s, you've got Ian Book, Tommy Stevens, who never even played as a quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. In fact, of those quarterbacks, the only one to actually attempt a pass for the New Orleans Saints was Ian Book in what was a COVID injury-riddled season and was this wild Monday night game in which both teams were down like 15 starters and all this other stuff. But Sean Canfield, who was drafted in 2010, never took a single snap in the NFL. Garrett Grayson, who was drafted in 2015 as a third-round pick, never took a single snap for not just the New Orleans Saints, but in his career. And then Tommy Stevens, who was drafted in 2020, did take snaps, but didn't attempt a single pass in his career. Instead, he had 4 carries for 24 yards with the Carolina Panthers as they moved him around to different positions. And then when it came to 4th-round pick from 2021, Ian Book, not a lot of success that he found in that game. 12 of 20 for 135 passing yards and a pair of interceptions, and was off the team before his rookie contract expired, though he now has a Super Bowl ring, being on the practice squad of the Philadelphia Eagles. So there is that. But under Payton, a lot of the quarterback positivity that came during his time came from free agents. Obviously, Drew Brees, who we just highlighted, but he also got a 5-1 career, including a 5-0 run in 2019 out of Teddy Bridgewater, who could be a veteran quarterback that the Saints look to bring back to help mentor a young quarterback here in New Orleans. That'd be a pretty good PR move as well. Jameis Winston went 5-2 under Sean Payton before he suffered his season-ending leg injury in 2021. And then, of course, Taysom Hill as a starting quarterback, 7-2 over the course of his time under Sean Payton in 2020 and 2021. And so Payton found good production from free agent acquisitions. Now, the idea here with Taysom Hill is that he's probably the best example of development from rookie to starter under Sean Payton, but really his development was about what he did all around the field, not necessarily about what he was able to do as a quarterback, although he does still have a 7-2 starting record in the league, which I'll make sure that I am fair about. But what Sean Payton never did was take a quarterback that he drafted. Remember, the acquisition of Taysom Hill was a free agent acquisition. He was an undrafted free agent with the Green Bay Packers, and the Saints signed him over from the Packers. And so the idea of going from drafted rookie to starter, the only guys that had that opportunity were Canfield, Stevens, Book, and Grayson, and none of them ever really had the opportunity. Now, we could watch Kellen Moore go from quarterback drafted by the New Orleans Saints to starter in an offseason, potentially. And there's a couple different ways the Saints could do that. It could be that Kellen Moore now has the chance to go and handpick his rookie quarterback from this year's draft class. If there's a quarterback that he loves and thinks can truly be the franchise quarterback moving forward, then you take him at 9. Otherwise, you look at the potential of maybe trading up for a guy that you really, really like at the end of the first round, so you get that 5th-year option, extend the life of that rookie contract, or you take somebody that you like, but you're not super sure about at one of the other rounds, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, whatever it might be. Those names include guys like Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck, who are both guys that could potentially be traded up for as well, I suppose. Maybe Dart more so, that conversation. Jalen Milroe in those middle rounds, Kyle McCord in those middle rounds, Will Howard in those middle rounds, whoever it is, right? It doesn't matter at that point. You're looking at taking a swing. But the other avenue of going from player drafted by the Saints to starter in an offseason would still be Spencer Rattler. And if Kellen Moore feels that he can get something better out of Spencer Rattler than he can get in the later rounds of this year's draft, and seeing how everything goes. Our good friend Mike Renner, who was formerly here at the Locked On Podcast Network, phenomenal dude, does phenomenal draft work, CBS and others. Now, talked about this on Twitter the other day or last night, where he was kind of speaking a little bit about like, hey, if I'm the Saints, I'm not really worried about drafting a quarterback. I'm rolling with Spencer Rattler. I'm going out there and I'm drafting a bunch of different pieces to help build the positions around Spencer Rattler and then see how things go with him, with a willingness to go back to the 2026 draft class, which I completely understand. And we're going to be discussing a lot of different ways the Saints can go from here. In fact, in tomorrow's episode, I want to not really compare, but I want to kind of argue for both, right? Drafting a quarterback this year, not drafting a quarterback this year, not drafting one early and drafting one late, but literally not drafting one and what that could potentially look like. We'll do that in tomorrow's episode. But it is an interesting opportunity to say, use your 9 selections to build up your roster as a part of the rebuild. And what I mean by rebuild is rebuilding your roster, not losing games. Those two things are not the same. Tanking and rebuilding are not the same thing. And so if you did that, you could potentially find success with Spencer Rattler, who everyone within the New Orleans Saints organization has indicated is somebody that they like and somebody that they still don't know what he is as a player because of the situation around him when he got his starts during his rookie year. So if that's the case, you are giving an indication that you like him and that if you got the opportunity to give him the scenario or the situation that you feel more comfortable with, that you might get better play from him. That's what one means the other in this situation. So if the Saints went that route, it would still count as Kellen Moore developing a quarterback from drafted quarterback to starter, which we've not seen in New Orleans for quite some time. And so we'll see if that's the route that the New Orleans Saints end up going. Tomorrow, we'll take a look. Will the New Orleans Saints do what they have not done since the 1970s, which is draft a quarterback in round 1 or round 2 of this year's draft? Or could they instead look to build around Spencer Rattler and not draft a quarterback at all, looking ahead to what 2026 could be? We'll go into the peaks and pitfalls of each of those situations. That's coming up in tomorrow's episode. We appreciate you very much. As always, making Locked On Saints your first listen, and for being here with us, making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.